In this episode of Ideas, I talked to Seth Godin about his successes, his fears, what makes him different, and much more. Here's our conversation. I'm excited about today's guest and genuinely interested in seeing where this conversation takes us. You've probably already heard of him. He has 18 best-selling books, some of the most viewed TED Talks videos ever. He's the founder of Alt MBA. I'm talking about none other than Seth Godin. Seth, thank you for coming on the show.
Well, it's a pleasure, Adam. It's not easy work to do a podcast on a regular basis, and I am honored that you would include me.
Thank you again. Seth, that's just a few of your accomplishments there that I mentioned along the way. Is there anything else, good, bad, that you can add that may give my listeners more insight into your story?
Well, I think it's fair to say I have failed more than they have. I'm more proud of the failures than the successes because the failures taught me more and required a little bit more gumption to set myself up to engage with again. And part of the challenge of living in an economy based on connection and innovation and art is signing up for that process of not being perfect and figuring out yet another way to not do something right.
That is so great. What is failure to Seth Godin?
Well, I think that when we're doing our best work, we are seeking to make a change happen. We are trying to change the person we engage with. That could be an author who's trying to get the reader to experience something new. It could be a salesperson who's trying to make a sale happen. It could be a nonprofit that's trying to improve someone's life. But in every case, we're seeking to make change happen. And so a failure, to me, is when we set out to do something and we're wrong about the narrative, or we're wrong about the choices, or we're wrong about what people want, and we end up failing to make the change we seek to make.
That's really good. Now, talking about success, I want to switch to that. Of course, each individual has to decide what success looks like for them. What's success to you? Now that we've talked about failure, what is it now in 2016? How's it changed over the years?
I would say about 30 years ago, I decided to stop measuring success through other people's eyes. Whether or not you went to a famous college, whether or not a stranger thinks you look good in that suit, whether or not you have a big enough house for it to please somebody else. These are foolish things to decide matter.
Mm-hmm.
If they matter to you, that's fine, but they shouldn't matter what other people think. You giving up definition of success to others, I think, is a shortcut to being pretty unhappy. So for me, my flip side for success is very similar to what I said about failure, which is what I seek to do is be able to have the leverage and the trust that I need to make the changes that are important to me. Being able to do that and keep my promises, that's for me success.
Trust, that's such an important word. How would you go about building trust? I mean, it's different for each situation, depending if we're talking about a blog or a business or whatever that may be. But what have been some key contributors to you building trust with people over the years?
Well, I think that there's one half of trust that's somewhat out of our control, which is we are judged. We are judged when we interact with people by our appearance, by our name, by where we came from, by how we shake their hands, by how we look. People like us trust people like us. And if you are seen as people like us, you are more likely to earn that first glimmer of trust. There's a reason that they wear uniforms on airplanes. It's not that flight attendants wouldn't be able to be flight attendants without those silly outfits. It's that those silly outfits are a totem, a signaling device to say, I'm one of those people, you should trust me. And then the second half of it is way more under our control, which is simply to keep our promises. That we make a promise, subtle or not, spoken or not, and then we get a chance to keep it or not. And if we keep our promises, we're more likely to get to make more of them.
Wow. So is there any value in making a promise and trying to meet that promise later, whether you know you can meet it or not? Or is there any value in that, or should you know ahead of time if you're able to?
Well, if I think about Google,
Hmm.
Google's stated promise is to organize all the information in the world.
Hmm.
But that's not what they need to do for us to trust them.
Hmm.
What they need to do for us to trust them is keep very, very small, subtle promises. So, what you don't want to have happen is you do a Google search and the next day your roommate says, yeah, I got a letter from Google and they said you were doing this, this, and this. Give me some money or I'm going to throw you out. Because that's not inherent in the promise Google made to you. The inherent in the promise is some level of privacy. Or if we think about the promise a police officer makes in the community, well, in some communities, that promise is I will treat you with respect and dignity and give you the benefit of the doubt. In other parts of the community, that promise might be seen totally differently. It might be a very negative promise that leads to no trust whatsoever. And so I think we have to think deeply about the actions that we are implying and that we actually take. So credit cards have been trusted by us for years, but you have no privacy with the credit card company. They know everything about you. They never said that they wouldn't know everything about you. What they implied was that they wouldn't surprise you
Mm.
with how they acted once they got the data.
Okay.
So there's all sorts of nested things here about trust. So you can run for president and act like a bozo and a clown and earn people's trust because you're not surprising them later
Mm.
when they find out that you're a bozo and a clown because you already promised them that.
Hmm. I see your point there. Uh, Going back to success, what are some contributors to your success besides luck? I know some of it plays with luck, but what are some actionable items that you have done?
Well, I think we got to be clear here. Luck is an actionable item. I was born in the right place, in the right century, from the right parents. That I can't control whatsoever. But the luck of you got rejected, now what do you do? It was bad luck that you got rejected. The luck that you got picked, now what are you going to do? That's up to you. So I am very grateful for the astonishing luck that I've gotten, but I think it's important that the people who have trouble accepting the fact that they're lucky understand that what you do after you're lucky in large measure is up to you. And so that means figuring out in those moments when you don't think anyone's looking and in those moments where you don't think it matters how you're going to behave.
Hmm. So important, yeah. Uh, Next, what are your biggest fears, and how do you fight them?
Well, I'll answer the second part first, which is I don't think you can make fear go away. And I think that fighting fear tends to make fear stronger. So instead, what I do is I dance with the fear, that I use the fear as a compass, that I acknowledge the fear and do things anyway, knowing that the same way a marathon runner expects to get tired, I expect to get afraid.
Hmm.
And you'll never find a marathon runner who says, teach me how to run a marathon without getting tired, because that's foolish.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll rarely find an honest creator who says, I'm capable to create without getting afraid. Uh,
Hmm.
my biggest fears have shifted over time. And I would say that now, one of my biggest ones is that I will waste the opportunity.
Is that more tied to impacting people, leaving a legacy? What do you think that's tied to?
Yeah, I'm not really, I think the legacy thing is a little self centered and I don't think about it at all.
Hmm.
I do think about the fact that, I only get today once and why would I waste it watching a TV show?
Mm-hmm.
And I think about I only get tomorrow's blog post once. Why would I waste it writing something merely to get a bunch of clicks? That every interaction we have with a human is a potential gift and we waste them all the time.
Mm-hmm. So many people do. Are you just wired that way? I mean, I've heard you say before in interviews things distract you, but is it just a self discipline? Is it keeping the focus on things that matter? What would you say has helped you cut out distractions?
Oh, I'm sorry. There was a puppy out the window. I am very easily distracted. Lots of people are. I think it's a gift if you want to treat it that way. I do believe that some people have to overcome a lot of wiring that's hard to overcome. And I know that a lot of people grew up in households that don't give them a head start. I'm not minimizing any of those things. But either we approach the world believing it's plastic and we can change it, or we approach the world believing it's fixed and we have no choices. And the problem with fixed no choices is that's really pessimistic. It's nihilistic. It doesn't give you a lot of options, hardly worth showing up.
Mm-hmm.
So it's might as well pick the first one, even if it's not true, because you're not sure which of your effort is going to work and which of your effort can't possibly overcome what you got to deal with. So you might as well assume it might make a difference. Why not?
That's an optimistic view. I love it. Do you think that the idea of just do it or all you have to do is begin working is dangerous in any way? Or maybe I should ask, do you believe that people can waste time if they're working on something, or does trial and error always serve a purpose within the process of work?
I try very hard not to or just. I once edited one of my books and took out the word just 186 times. What's useful sometimes is the word merely. We should merely do it. And by merely do it, I mean without commentary, without a lot of drama, without a lot of wasteful preparation, without a lot of anxiety. We should merely do that thing. Because if we do that thing, merely do it, it will start a process that will enable us to make the difference we seek to make.
I'm taking that one away. Thank you for that. I use just a lot, so mental note there. If you could go back and completely change or slightly tweak anything you've written or said in past interviews or books, what would it be? I guess, is there anything you would change?
Well, I'm wrong a ton, and that's part of failing a lot. I'm hesitant to change any of it because if I went back in time and changed it, then I wouldn't be me. And the being wrong parts are part of who I have become, and I don't want to change that. In terms of the advice that I have given people in my blog and on my books and stuff, I think on balance, people are better off with that corpus of work than most others. So I'm not ready to offer anybody a money back guarantee on the sum total of innovation here. I think what I'm trying to do is not give people a map, but give them a compass. And the compass has been pointing north for a long time. In the detail and the execution, I'm frequently wrong. That's why I buy stock in no companies, because every time I buy stock in a company, its stock goes down.
Yeah.
Right. And so, I'm the first to tell you I am often wrong, but I'm also willing to tell you I'm often interesting.
Interesting wins a lot, I would have to say. Would you agree?
Well, it depends. If I had bought Google stock at 80 and bought business.com for $26, those would have been good days' work. So it's nice to be right. The thing is, we have no clue how to do it on a regular basis.
Maybe some luck in there.
You betcha.
Is there anything that you've always wanted to do but haven't done yet? Or have you already done it all?
Oh, there are a ton of things that I would like to do, either for the extraordinary experience of it or because I think I could make more change happen in the way I seek to make it happen. But I'm not willing to pay the price it would take to go that far in any given direction, whether it's a compromise or a different kind of effort than I've put into the work. And so I don't dwell on that at all. I think one of the key things that someone might take away from this conversation is this. We are taught biggest possible is a goal. That they should play football in England because that would make the NFL bigger. And you should be on a TV show because that would get more people to see you. And your restaurant should have 27 branches instead of one because then more people would pay you money. And I think the race to be the biggest possible keeps us from doing meaningful stuff. And I might encourage people instead to focus on the smallest possible. What is the smallest sustainable market that you can change? What is the smallest number of readers that would make your book worth writing? What is the smallest number of listeners that could sustain this podcast? And if we are able to focus on the small, then we could do extraordinary work, and lo and behold, we'll get bigger.
Hmm. You get bigger by becoming better.
You're doing this work that matters, and then the word spreads because people seek to be seen, they seek to be transformed. That brings you more of the right people, not just more people, because more people isn't your goal.
Right. And it takes so much patience. If that is your goal, going back to our discussion of success, what if somebody's version of success is they want a blog that has 10 million readers? That's probably the wrong metric to look at, but what if that is their version of success? What would you say to those people?
Well, I would ask that person, how does 10 million readers help you make the change you seek to make?
Right.
Right? Because what we've seen on Twitter and on blogs and on YouTube is the way you get 10 million is you act like an idiot.
Yeah.
And you do work that's banal and you race to the bottom. So given that that's what it takes to get 10 million, is this the change you seek to make in the world? Right? Then every once in a while, someone like Oprah comes along who has 40 million and gets to talk about the color purple. But that doesn't happen very often. So if that's really your dream, I would argue you're hiding, because you know that in the post-TV culture, you can't possibly get there.
That is such good advice. To get at the heart of it, would you say that you're saying for people to shoot for meaningful work above anything else?
Yeah, I mean, what I have found is that what human beings want most of all is to be seen. They want to be connected. They want to be missed if they were gone. They want to know that they made an impact that was worth making. But none of those things have a number built into them.
Right.
That if you can do that for 100 people deeply, you will probably find that is more satisfying than doing it for 20 million people and also getting a pile of money. Because the price you have to pay is you're not really changing any of them. You're just putting on a show.
And the reason I kept asking you questions around that is such an important message that people need to hear now, because it's become, in my opinion, more about numbers than anything else for a lot of people.
And it's true for some people. And the reason is because it's a good way to hide.
Yeah.
Because you're saying, I can't possibly do something scary or important. I have some social media grooming to do, and I have to make these numbers go up.
Would you say patience is more important than anything else, and just do meaningful work and it will come? What would you tell those people that feel like they've been doing it for years and aren't seeing those things come?
Well, I guess I would start with this. Most people who aren't seeing it come are not seeing it because they haven't changed 20 people or 200 people or 2,000 people. And if you can't change 2,000 people on your own, what makes you think you're going to be able to change 2 million people when you have a book? I view in most cases the book or the record album or the Kickstarter especially as the last step in the process, not the first one. That there are clearly the exceptions, the Harper Lees of the world, who go from 0 to 1 million. But those are super, super rare. Maybe 50 books a year out of the 1 million that are published will break through and reach large numbers of strangers and change them. That if you want to take a long shot, please, by all means. But if you are looking for a reliable, stepwise way to make the change you seek, you need a method. You need a process that takes you step by step, bit by bit. You know, Louis C.K. isn't Louis C.K. because he had a TV show. He has a TV show because he was Louis C.K. And the way you become Louis C.K. is you gig for 5 people at open mic night, and then you change them enough that you get a gig for 10 people, and then you change them enough that you get a gig for 50 people, and then maybe years from now you get to do the Beacon Theater. But if I called up someone who'd never done this before and said, you're going to have the Beacon Theater tomorrow night, you're probably not going to change anybody in the Beacon Theater just because you're on stage.
Yeah. Right.
Right? And so, you know, the gatekeepers persuaded us that not only do they get to pick us, they got to make us. But they don't get to make us so much. That's why they're looking for numbers. They're looking for numbers because they've discovered that with 1 million books coming out every year, the chances they can make someone who no one has ever heard of into a star is really, 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 really small.
Mm-hmm.
And instead, be a star, and then you'll get yourself the book you need to amplify the change you are seeking to make.
That is so important. Thanks for that, Seth. Let's discuss one thing that I have seen that sets you apart from other people. I'm talking about the way you handle email. Many people I know that I correspond with through email, they have assistants that reply to me, and then I meet with those people at a later meeting and just correspond with the assistants. But with you, the experience is much different. People email into you, they receive a reply typically from you pretty quickly. At least that's been my experience. Why have you decided to be the first line of communication for your email account?
Well, I'm certainly not telling anyone else to do it the way I do it. I mean, I'm happy to give advice, but
Yeah.
my advice on this topic is fraught with all sorts of weirdness. I don't have any staff. There are 2 or 3 people who work on the Alt MBA, but there's just me. If it's written, I wrote it. If it's an email, I wrote it. I decided that years ago to be just me. The amount of training I would need to give somebody to pretend to be me or to be my front line and make good decisions for me still feels like it's not worth the journey. Beyond that, I wrote a book called Permission Marketing
Mm-hmm.
and try not to be too much of a hypocrite. And that means if someone who is non-anonymous and a human who has something to add reaches out to me in a non-selfish way, I figure they deserve a little bit of my time. I often disappoint those people because they don't get a lot of my time. And I have stated on the record, and I will repeat here, if you email me, you run a 1 in 3 chance of bursting into flame. So please don't take the risk. I have enough email. I'm not soliciting that you write to me. Write to Adam instead.
No,
Adam
no,
will
no,
tell
no.
you his email address. Write to Adam 3 times before you write to me. But, you know, I'm trying to be a human. I'm trying to be present in a world that's stripping away our humanity. And so I don't do TV shows. I'm not on Twitter. I don't go to meetings. I'm not on Facebook. I have tried to pick media where I can be present. And the email thing is a bad habit. It keeps me from doing work I'd rather do in the long run. So I try to wean myself from it. Um, so that's why I'm not suggesting people in the public eye do it. But I am saying that you have tools. You have an Instagram account and you have a Twitter account and you have an email. And what we teach at the Alt MBA is simple. What is it for? What is Twitter for? Why are you using it? What is email for? Why are you using it? Are you trying to game the system, hack your way through, run a scam, trade lunches, move your way up? Well, if so, I have no time for you. And I think you're going to end up pretty bummed out. But if you want to use these tools in a different way, please do. But just be aware that there's a trade-off to every tool you use and use it accordingly.
Good advice there. Sound advice. The other thing that I've really noticed that makes you different from everybody else is that you tend to go against the grain, go against what everybody else is doing. Have you learned to just seek what makes you happy? When did you stop chasing what everyone else chases? How did you get to this place of not seeking approval? It's a loaded question here, but what would you say on that?
Well, okay, so there's 2 parts. One is going against the grain, a useful process to making an impact in the world, a useful way to make change happen. And I think it's probably the best way to do so because going with what everyone else is they wouldn't miss you if you weren't doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So I start there. Then the question is, can you train yourself that process makes you happy? Because I think we can make ourselves happy with lots of different things. And because I was a ruckus maker, because I was impatient and in a hurry to make this change happen, I got enough feedback internally and externally that it made me happy, so I do it more. That's not for everyone. That's just my posture.
Beautiful answer. Let's switch now to connection because being a community builder, whether we're talking about an online community or a business or whatever else, having a focus on connection and relationship is so important. I mean, it just is. So, on that same note, what does connection mean to you? And then, how does one actually connect? We kind of talked about that second part earlier, but if you,
Right.
yep.
So I've defined connection as would they miss you if you were gone? And so you can connect to the kind woman who's at the co-working space every day, straightening things up, making sure the coffee maker's working, etc. Because as a human to another human, you've come to see each other.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, you can also connect to the person you're following on Twitter because their tweets feed something in your soul. So you can connect spiritually, you can connect on a business front. That's what I'm talking about when I talk about the connection economy. We don't connect to spammers. We don't connect to invisible corporations. We don't connect to the hustler who's trying to get something from us.
Mm-hmm.
And so, with all of those forms of connection, what we realize is they are now more valuable than a factory. They are more valuable than a secret formula. Because if you look at a company like Amazon, Amazon's factory isn't worth anything. Amazon's software isn't worth very much. Those could both be copied in no time. But Amazon's connection to 50 million people who want them to succeed so they can get what they want, that keeps getting stronger.
Hmm. Yeah, and I mean, this whole connection piece that we're discussing here, we need to do it in different ways to grow, and conversations need to happen for growth to take place. And to move forward, we must discuss what others aren't discussing. This being said, how important has discussion and interaction been to your work? And then what has it done for you?
There are people who are annoyed at the fact that I don't have a lot of discussion and don't take a lot of input around my best work. It's my work, and maybe it'll work for you and maybe it won't. I am not Bob Dylan, but I'd like to think that just as Bob Dylan brings his things to you and says, "Here, I made this," that's what I'm trying to do. There is definitely a place for the interior decorator who spends hours with you going through swatch books and the two of you come up with what you want. But that's not what I do. What I do is I notice and I listen and I poke around and then I bring something to people and I say, "Here, I made this." And again, not for everybody, but it's a practice. And you need to pick one or the other. You shouldn't pretend to do one, but do the other one.
On the topic of discussion, what's one topic you feel needs to be discussed that isn't being talked about?
I think that we still have trouble seeing people for who they are and being willing to go to where they are in order to talk with them.
Hmm.
That our instinct, which is a little jingoistic, which is a little nationalistic, which goes back a long way in American culture, is people like us, however you define that, are somehow better, more chosen, more entitled, and either you get the joke or you move out.
Mm-hmm.
And we do that at corporations, we do that at nonprofits, and we do it at the symphony. And the fact is, everyone's opinion is their opinion. Everyone's experience is their experience. And if you want to connect to that person, in order to make change for that person, you have to go where they are. They're not always going to go to where you are.
Hmm. So leaving what's comfortable and
That,
going where the okay.
yeah, that's a great
Yeah.
way to say it.
Okay. Where do you find inspiration?
Mostly from people like you. Um, that I am not at all inspired by people who maintain the status quo or who are very good at doing what they are told. I am really inspired by people who care enough to say, "Listen to this," or care enough to say, "Follow me."
I mean, so is it that inspiration that guides you in your work, or would you say it's something else? Is it inspiration for something more? Is it going back to the people conversation, leaving an impact?
Yeah, I mean, what's guided me for 40 years is the look in the face of a kid when she realizes she could do something she didn't think she could do.
Hmm.
That is, I'm hooked on that. I think we have a moral obligation to make that happen more. And I think it pays off for all of us when it occurs.
So, in a way, would you say part of your mission in life is to help people believe in themselves?
I don't know how to parse that phrase. I mean, we're clearly not fictional characters. So maybe to use Ben and Roz Zander's language, it's for people to understand the possible.
Hmm.
That doesn't mean you're sure you're going to be able to succeed. It doesn't mean believing you're going to win. I think it does mean embracing the fact that something is possible and then doing the insanely hard work to make it true.
On that same conversation, how important is self belief in oneself to produce meaningful work, would you say?
Most of the people who I know who are off the charts, almost famous creators,
Hmm.
believe in themselves less than you and the people listening to themselves believe in themselves.
Hmm.
There's a wide river of self doubt that goes with the leaping of making a difference.
Is self doubt an inclination that someone is onto something good or no?
It might be.
Okay.
It might be. It also might be that they're just anxious. It's a little like spiciness. Sometimes if a food is spicy, it's a hint that this food's going to be delicious. And sometimes it's just spicy.
Yeah.
They're not related.
Okay. Also, on this same conversation, is talk on that idea of how people can push through the resistance that comes when people try to do something meaningful.
All right, so you're quoting from Steve Pressfield, who wrote a fabulous book called The War of Art. And then I got him to publish a sequel called Do the Work for Beginners. And the idea of the resistance is it's where writer's block comes from. It's where all of our ornate senses, abilities to hide come from. The resistance gets us to shank a golf ball on the 17th hole. The resistance makes people say stupid things when smart things would make a difference. Because we are wired, our amygdala is programmed for us to fit in, to keep our head down, to not get in trouble. And yes, it's present and it gets louder and stronger the closer we get to the truth, the closer we get to pushing through the dip, the closer we get to doing amazing stuff. And that's where the self sabotage comes from, because it doesn't want us to get to that last step. And by acknowledging its existence and by realizing that that bump is definitely ahead of us in the road, we can prepare for it. We can say, don't even bother heading down this path if you're not willing to do that hard part when it shows up. So if you know that that hard part is part of the deal, you're way more likely to be able to be prepared for it and accept it as part of the work that you need to do.
Mm-hmm. So embrace difficult. People should embrace difficult.
Well, the difficult is the point, isn't it? If it wasn't difficult, everyone would do it. And if everyone would do it, it wouldn't be worth anything.
That's right. I mean, I'm taking away a lot from today. I know listeners are. What's the best advice you've ever personally received, and who was it from?
Oh.
That's a tough question.
Yeah, I mean, because you don't usually keep track of it when you get it. I mean, at one level, I'm pretty confident saying the best advice I could give you is ignore good advice. Because good advice is well meaning. And because it's well meaning, people don't want you to be hurt. They don't want you to stand out. Good advice will tend to say, go to graduate school for 2 more years. Good advice will tend to be, don't raise your hand. You might say something stupid. Just listen. This is all good advice that's worth ignoring. So if I had to give you one blanket piece of good advice, it would be that one. Ignore good advice.
That's good advice. And if you only had one sentence to leave people with today, what would it be? From our conversation or something we didn't even talk about. It could be anything.
Well, so let me give you a practical action item instead,
Okay.
which is something that we've integrated deeply into the Alt MBA, but it's something that has nothing to do with that and that anyone can do starting tomorrow, which is blog every single day. If you blog every single day, even if no one reads it, in 3 weeks, your life will be changed.
Hmm. How long have you been doing that?
Well, if you count my email newsletter that I started with, it's now been more than 20 years. And I would do it even if no one read my blog. The act of noticing things, making a stand, describing what you think is going to happen next, clearly and generously outlining your point of view, knowing that it's going to be in the world, and knowing you need to do it again tomorrow just opens all sorts of doors for people.
Yeah. I noticed that too when I started writing more. It solidified what I believe. It's important.
And it can also undermine what you believe, which is even better.
Which is even better.
Because, right, because if you find yourself typing it up and you go, I can't stand behind this, then you just discovered that you've got some work to do.
Wow. Such good stuff here, Seth. Thank you. I took so much away from your words. I can only hope that there will be listeners who will walk away from hearing our conversation today and will take action, because that's what it's all about. Last question here. Where should people go to find your work, Seth?
You can type Seth into Google. I'm the first match. You can type blog. I might be the third match. Or you can visit altmba.com.
Awesome. Thanks again for coming on the show.
Thanks. Go make a ruckus. I appreciate your time, Adam.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you got something out of these ideas. Go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss an episode.